before the hunt began, a truth lay sleeping in the labyrinths beneath the earth. It was a truth that promised to lift humanity to the level of gods. But instead, it would unleash a plague of beasts and drown a city in blood and madness. This is the story of Bloodborne, and in this journey, we'll go from the very beginning to the discovery of the old blood and the birth of the healing church, to the final haunting choice that awaits a lone hunter underneath a pale moon. But first, I just wanted to take a moment to let you know you can now find 2 Lore to Sleep To podcasts on Spotify, one specifically for 40K, and the other for all the other lore. And if you want to support the channel further and unlock some goodies for yourself, head over to my Patreon, where you can unlock exclusive Lore to Sleep To audios. Or you can head to my Ko-fi, where you can commission your own custom sleep video. And finally, you can even find some super cool 40K inspired sleep merch on my website. Links for all of this are down in the description. Sleep well, and let's get back to your regularly scheduled sleep content. Ages before the first stone of Yharnam was ever laid, there lived a civilization known as the Pthumerians. They weren't quite human, though they looked the part. They were a people often described as superhuman, and they possessed an understanding of the arcane arts that would eventually be lost to time. Imagine a tall, lanky people with skin as pale as porcelain, the natural consequence of living their entire lives in a subterranean world, never touched by the sunlight. Their society was surprisingly advanced. It's no small thing, after all, to build a sprawling civilization deep beneath the earth. They carved out a great labyrinth, a tomb for the gods, that would one day become the very foundation of Yharnam's fate. In their early days, the Pthumerians were humble guardians. They lived in the quiet dark, tending to the ancient labyrinth and the slumbering gods they had discovered in its deepest chambers. Pthumerian society seems to have been a matriarchy, with women holding incredible power. You had the Keepers, eternal warriors who watched over the sleeping gods, their bodies cremated by flame to grant them a kind of unending, ashen existence. And then there were the bell ringers, mad Pthumerian women whose sinister bells echoed through the stone halls, a sound that could blur the lines between worlds. But as their civilization grew, so too did their pride. They were no longer content to be simple caretakers. Their descendants named a leader for themselves, a queen. Their capital city, Eel, was even named for one of their monarchs. But it was the last queen, a woman named Yharnam, who would become central to their history and to the history of everyone who followed. The Pthumerians had unlocked what would later be called the Eldritch Truth, a fundamental cosmic understanding of the universe. They stood closer to the gods than humanity ever had, but this closeness to greatness came with a terrible price. The Pthumerians were the first to encounter the Scourge of the Beast, the ancient ancient city of Loren, a part of their kingdom, was said to be the root of this plague. It was a land that fell into ruin as its people were twisted into mindless creatures, a grim foreshadowing of Yharnam's own destiny. It was during this time of plague, on a night where the moon hung red and low, that Queen Yharnam was chosen. We don't know why she was selected, but a great one blessed her womb with a child that would be both mortal and divine. The birth, however, did not go well. The infant, a great one named Murgo, was lost, leaving the queen in a state of eternal sorrow, her blood-stained dress a permanent reminder of her tragedy. This event, the impregnation of a mortal by a cosmic being, and the stillbirth that followed, would echo through the ages, a repeating pattern of ambition and loss. The Thumerians, the keepers of the gods, had touched the cosmos. In doing so, they had sown the seeds of their own destruction, leaving behind a silent tomb filled with secrets, slumbering gods, and a very special kind of blood. To really understand the disaster waiting to unfold in Yharnam, we have to talk about the beings who were the cause of it all, the Great Ones. These weren't gods in any sense we would recognize. No benevolent deities or wrathful tyrants demanding worship. They were something far stranger, far more alien. The Great Ones are cosmic, multi-dimensional beings, existing on planes of thought so far beyond our own that our minds can barely begin to comprehend it. The original Japanese script calls them superior ones, a name that doesn't speak to their morality, but simply their elevated state of being. Their physical forms are often bizarre, from the insect-like amygdala to the fungal Abratus, daughter of the cosmos. But their true essence is often formless. Take the Great One, Odin, for instance. He exists as only a voice in the medium of blood. These are beings of immense power, able to create and shape entire dimensions, dreamscapes and nightmares that are just as real as our waking world. The hunter's dream, the nightmare of Mensis, the hunter's nightmare. All of these are realms given form by the consciousness of a Great One. Yet, for all their godlike status, the Great Ones are defined by a profound cosmic tragedy. They are sterile. They can't reproduce on their own, and are forever seeking a surrogate, a mortal vessel to bear their children. This is their core motivation, this desperate, instinctual need to continue their kind. It's why they interact with lesser beings like us, why they might bless the womb of a mortal queen like Yharnam, or answer the calls of those who seek their power. This process, however, is filled with peril. The birth of a Great One child almost always results in the death of its parent, a tragic cycle of creation and destruction. The discovery of these beings is what's known as the Eldritch Truth. It isn't a simple fact, but a fundamental shift in how one sees the universe. It's the shocking realization that humanity is not the center of everything, that there are higher planes of existence, and that there are beings so vast their very presence can shatter the lesser mind. To gain this understanding is to gain insight. Insight is a measure of your perception, your ability to see the world as it truly is. With enough of it, the veil is lifted. Suddenly, you can see the amygdala great ones clinging to the sides of buildings where they were invisible before. You can hear the crying of an infant great one that isn't really there. But this knowledge comes at a cost. The human mind just wasn't built to comprehend the Eldritch truth. As your insight grows, so too does your vulnerability to frenzy, a state of pure madness brought on by cosmic revelation. The more you see, the less stable your reality becomes. It is the great paradox of seeking the Great Ones. The knowledge that grants power is the same knowledge that leads to madness. Long after the Thumerian civilization had faded into myth, its labyrinths sleeping silently beneath the ground, a new institution arose. Tucked away on the shores of a great lake, far from the nearest city, stood the college of Byrgenwerth. It was a respected place of learning, but its provost, a man named Master Willem, had grown tired of the limits of human intellect. He believed humanity was stagnating, thinking only on the basest of planes. He looked to the cosmos, to the theoretical existence of higher beings, for a way to elevate the human race. Willem's goal was nothing short of transcendence. He wanted to evolve humanity, to raise our minds and our very being to the level of the Great Ones. His core philosophy was wrapped up in the concept of eyes on the inside. He believed the key to this evolution wasn't physical strength, but the accumulation of insight, of knowledge. To line one's brain with eyes was to gain the ability to see the higher planes, to understand the Eldritch truth, and from there, to ascend. A group of brilliant young scholars gathered around Master Willem, all of them dedicated to his quest. Among them were people who would go on to shape the future in profound and terrible ways. Lawrence, a favored and ambitious student. Mikolaj, a man who would one day host a nightmare. And Carol, a rune carver who would learn to write down the inhuman sounds of the Great Ones. Even Gehrman, the man who would become the first hunter, was part of this inner circle. Together, they dove into history and archaeology, studying the legends of forgotten civilizations. Their research eventually led them to the discovery that would define their legacy. Deep beneath the ground, where Yharnam would one day be built, they found the Thumerian labyrinth, the tomb of the gods. And inside, they found exactly what they had been looking for: proof of the Great Ones. They discovered remnants of Thumerian culture, arcane artifacts, and most importantly, they found a holy medium, a substance with miraculous properties. They had found the old blood, the blood of the Great Ones. The discovery of the old blood split the scholars of Byrgenwerth. They had found the very essence of the Great Ones, a holy medium that pulsed with cosmic power. That first contact must have seemed like a miracle. It likely had incredible healing properties. Maybe a scholar with a paper cut accidentally touched it and watched the wound seal itself instantly. This was real, tangible proof of divine power, a force that could not only heal the sick, but could potentially rewrite what it meant to be human. For Master Willem, this discovery brought both validation and a deep, creeping dread. He knew the blood was a path to power, but he was convinced it was the wrong one. His adage, "We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood," became his mantra. The phrase shows a deep understanding of blood's role in human life, but also a fearful respect for its corrupting influence when mixed with the cosmos. He believed humanity needed to evolve mentally first, to gain eyes on the inside and the courage to face the Eldritch truth, before it could ever hope to control the physical power of the blood. To use it without that inner evolution would be ruinous. One of Willem's students, Carol, listened to her master's warning. She dedicated her research to methods that didn't rely on blood at all. She studied the inhuman sounds made by the Great Ones and learned that these sounds held power. By transcribing them, she created the Carol runes, symbols that could be etched into a hunter's mind to grant them supernatural strength and abilities. Provost Willem must have been proud of her work. It was a path to power through knowledge, not consumption. But others at Byrgenwerth, especially Willem's most promising student, Lawrence, saw things differently. Where Willem saw danger, Lawrence saw opportunity. He believed that the old blood was the key to mankind's ascension, the very tool they needed to evolve. He wasn't blind to the risks, but the potential was just too great to ignore. This created a fundamental split in the college. You had the loyalists, who followed Master Willem, believing in slow evolution through insight, and you had the radicals, led by Lawrence, who believed in evolution through the direct power of the old blood. And this wasn't just an academic debate. It was a schism that would tear Byrgenwerth apart. The scholars had found something that could either elevate humanity to godhood or plunge it into a nightmare of beasts. Which path to take? Willem chose the path of the mind. Lawrence chose the path of the body. Their disagreement would soon lead them to a place of no return. An event so horrific that its consequences would curse them for generations. The pursuit of knowledge had brought them to a crossroads, and their next steps would lead them to a quiet fishing hamlet where their academic dreams would be stained forever with blood and sin. The hunger for more insight, for more eyes, drove the scholars to seek out any and all contact with the Great Ones. Informants brought them news of a remote fishing village on the coast. The people there were said to worship a being that had washed ashore, the Great One known as Cause. For Master Willem and his scholars, this was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. A real, physical Great One, even a dead one, was the ultimate source of knowledge. And so, an expedition from Byrgenwerth was sent, led by Lawrence's faction and accompanied by the college's muscle, the first hunters, Gehrman and his apprentice Maria. They descended upon the quiet village. What happened next was not a scientific inquiry. It was massacre. The villagers, who may have already been transforming due to their closeness to the dead Cause and the parasites coming from their body, weren't seen as people. They were seen as specimens. Driven by their lust for insight, the scholars committed unspeakable atrocities. They cut open the villagers, forcibly searching their skulls for eyes, for any physical proof of cosmic evolution. The Hamlet priest's dialogue speaks of blasphemous murderers and blood-crazed fiends, a grim testament to the brutality of the raid. Gehrman and Maria, the hunters, carried out the slaughter. For Maria, a woman from Canehurst who deliberately rejected her own family's connection to blood arts, this act was a source of profound self-hatred. She was so disgusted by what she had done that she later threw her beloved weapon into a well, unable to bear the weight of her sins. But the scholars weren't only interested in the villagers. Their main target was the carcass of Cos herself. There, on the beach, they performed the ultimate desecration. Cos had been pregnant. From her lifeless body, the scholars and hunters forcibly tore away her unborn child, the infant Great One known as the Orphan. They took this child back to Byrgenwerth to study, and from its corpse they retrieved at least one of the coveted third umbilical cords, a physical manifestation of a connection to a Great One. This sin, this violation of a god and the slaughter of her worshippers did not go unanswered. The survivors, or perhaps the lingering consciousness of Cos herself, laid a terrible curse upon the hunters and their followers. As a Hamlet priest cries out in the nightmare, lay the curse of blood upon them and their children and their children's children forevermore. This curse created the hunter's nightmare, a hellish realm where blood-drunk hunters are trapped for eternity, forced to fight beasts and relive the hunt forever. Gehrman would be trapped in his own dream, and Maria, after taking her own life out of guilt, would be resurrected in the nightmare, forced to stand guard over the secret of the fishing hamlet the source of her greatest shame. But the raid was, in a twisted way, a success. The scholars now had a third umbilical cord and physical proof of the Great Ones. They had the knowledge they had craved. But the price was a curse that would plague their legacy forever, in a schism that could no longer be mended. The blood on their hands would never wash away. The horrors at the fishing hamlet were the breaking point. The knowledge gained from the orphan's umbilical cord was huge, but the way they got it created a chasm between Master Willem and Lawrence that could never be bridged. Willem's axiom, fear the old blood, was no longer just a philosophical guideline. It was a desperate plea born from the horror he'd seen. He saw that Lawrence's ambition had led to butchery and a cosmic curse. He believed, now more than ever, that humanity was not ready. Lawrence, however, was unwavering. He saw the curse and the bloodshed not as a sign to stop, but as a tragic, necessary cost of progress. He held the old blood in his hands, the key, he believed, to curing humanity's sickness and lifting it to a higher state of being. He couldn't turn back now, and this disagreement led to one final, fateful confrontation. A memory of it still lingers in the Grand Cathedral, held within a beastly skull. We see Lawrence coming to bid his master farewell. Willem's response is laced with bitterness and sorrow. Oh, I know. You think now to betray me. Lawrence insists it's not a betrayal, arguing that Willem simply refuses to listen. But he promises not to forget their adage, the warning to fear the blood. Willem recites the words with him, a shared creed that now painfully marks their division. We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood. As Lawrence turns to leave, his path now clear, Willem offers one last, desperate warning. By the gods, fear it, Lawrence. But Lawrence didn't fear it. He left Byrgenwerth, and he didn't go alone. He took with him a number of scholars who shared his radical belief in the blood's power. This was the great schism of Byrgenwerth. The college, once the unified center of cosmic research, was now broken. Master Willem and his loyalists remained at the secluded college, continuing their quiet, contemplative search for insights, trying to line their brains with eyes while shunning the blood. Byrgenwerth would slowly fade into obscurity, a forgotten place with a comatose old man staring at a lake, guarding a secret that he hoped would keep the world from seeing the horrors he knew were hiding just beneath the surface. Lawrence, along with his followers like Mikalash and Gehrman, took the forbidden knowledge and the old blood with them. They wouldn't be content with quiet study. They would take their findings to the growing city of Yharnam, and there they would found a new institution, one that would share the miraculous healing of the blood with everyone. It would be an institution built on Lawrence's belief and Willem's greatest fear. He would call it the Healing Church. And with this church, that would become the city's heart and soul, he promised miracles. The practice of blood ministration began, and it was everything he had hoped. The old blood could cure any disease, mend any wound, and grant vigor to the frail. Yharnam became a destination for pilgrims from across the land, all seeking this miraculous cure. The culture of blood worship flourished, and Lawrence, as the first vicar, was its high priest. In the grand cathedral, a new adage was taught: seek the old blood. The church presented the blood as a holy medium, a form of communion with the divine. But this was a faith built on a half-truth. The church knew the dangers, yet they preached only the rewards. Behind the public facade of healing and salvation, the research continued. The church was split into two covert factions, each pursuing a different path to transcendence, mirroring the original schism at Byrgenwerth. The choir, operating from the upper cathedral ward, was the church's elite. They were closer to Willem's original philosophy, believing that true ascension came from insight and communion with the cosmos, not just blood. They studied the stars and reached out to the great ones left behind, like the abandoned Abridus. Their goal was to gain eyes on the inside. Meanwhile, the school of Mensis, led by Lawrence's old colleague Mikalash, took a more direct and reckless approach. They believed in using rituals to force an audience with the Great Ones, using the umbilical cord from the Orphan of Kos to create a nightmare realm where they could contact the infant Great One, Murgo. Both factions were obsessed with evolution, but their methods would only deepen Yharnam's sickness. Lawrence, in his ambition to save humanity, had built a glorious institution on a foundation of lies, and the entire city was now drinking from a poisoned chalice. His human skull would eventually become an artifact of worship, a grim reminder that he became the very first cleric beast. The miracle of blood healing came with a terrible side effect. It began slowly at first, an unnerving aggression, a creeping paranoia. Then, the transformations. People who had partaken of the old blood began to change, their bodies twisting into grotesque beasts. This was the Scourge of the Beast, the plague that Byrgenwerth had first witnessed in ancient Loren. The very cure that had made Yharnam famous was now its curse. To make matters worse, a separate plague known as Ashen Blood swept through old Yharnam. This disease was unrelated to the Scourge, but its devastating effects created a panic. Desperate for a cure, the populace turned to the healing church, demanding more and more of the old blood. This only accelerated the spread of the true plague, the Scourge of Beasts. The situation spiraled out of control. Old Yharnam was eventually burned and abandoned in a desperate, failed attempt to contain the infection. A new, secret solution was needed. Lawrence turned to his old associate from Byrgenwerth, Gehrman. In a hidden workshop, Gehrman trained the first generation of hunters. Their purpose was simple and brutal: to hunt the beasts under the cover of darkness, silencing the horrific truth of what the healing blood was doing to the people. Gehrman's hunters were swift and silent, practitioners of the arts of quickening. But as the scourge worsened and the beasts grew larger and more horrific, this discreet approach was no longer enough. The Healing Church created its own workshop, led by a new kind of hunter, Ludwig. Ludwig was the first church hunter, a righteous hero who believed he was protecting the people. He recruited Yharnam citizens, even clerics, turning the hunt from a covert operation into a holy crusade. The hunters were no longer shadows, they were knights, wielding shining swords in the name of the church. Yet, it was a known, tragic secret that clerics, the most devout believers in the blood, would transform into the most hideous beasts of all. Ludwig himself would eventually succumb, his honorable crusade ending in a madness of blood and horror. The church was now fighting a war against an enemy of its own making. As Yharnam descended into an endless night of the hunt, a stranger arrives in the city. You, a lone traveler seeking a cure for an unknown ailment. You've come to Yharnam in search of something called pale blood. The opening words of the journey frame this as the ultimate goal. Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. But what is pale blood? The term is cryptic, its meaning veiled. Some suggest it refers to the pale, blood-drained color of the sky when the veil between worlds is thin. Others hint that pale blood is the name of a specific great one, the one that descends from the moon. Upon receiving a transfusion of Yharnam's unique blood, you are bound to a strange spectral realm, the hunter's dream. This pocket dimension, a perfect copy of the abandoned workshop in the waking world, is hosted by Gehrman, the first hunter. But Gehrman is not its master. He is its prisoner. The true master of the dream is a mysterious great one known as the Moon Presence, the very being Lawrence once beckoned. The Moon Presence is the source of the dream, a being that, like all great ones, yearns for a child and seeks a worthy surrogate. The hunter's dream is its mechanism. It empowers hunters, binding them to a cycle of death and rebirth, allowing them to grow stronger with each kill by absorbing blood echoes. Gehrman serves as its guide, urging you to hunt the great beasts and put an end to the nightmare of Mensis, where Mikolash and his school are performing a ritual to commune with the infant Great One Virgo. Your hunt has a hidden purpose. You are not just a beast slayer. You are a tool of a cosmic entity, unknowingly participating in a conflict between great ones. You are tasked with silencing the crying infant god whose lament is beckoning the moon and accelerating the collapse of worlds. Your journey takes you through the blood-soaked streets of Yharnam, from the grand cathedrals to the forbidden forests, and into the nightmarish realms born from cosmic consciousness. You confront the failures of the healing church in the form of its mutated vicar, Amelia, who clutches a pendant from Lawrence. She transforms into a shrieking beast. You uncover the secrets of Byrgenwerth, and in the nightmare of Mincis, you finally confront Mikalash and his deranged school. At the peak of the nightmare, you face a silent, multi-limbed guardian, Murgo's wet nurse. This great one appears to be the protector of Queen Yharnam's lost child. Upon its defeat, the infant's crying finally ceases. A silence falls over the dreamlands. The night is near its end. You return to the hunter's dream to find the workshop in flames. Gehrman awaits you under a great tree in a field of white flowers. He has one last act of kindness to offer. He tells you that he will free you from the dream, allowing you to awaken in the morning sun, forgetting the horrors of the hunt. This is the choice every hunter in the dream eventually faces: to be freed from the nightmare, or to be consumed by it. The fate of the hunt and your own transcendence now rests on a single decision. The first path is one of release. You can accept Gehrman's offer. He stands, and with a heavy heart performs his final duty. In a swift, merciful execution, he frees you from the dream. You awaken in the waking world to the sight of a sunrise over Yharnam. The night is over, but the cycle is not. The dream and its cosmic master remains. Another hunt will one day begin, and another hunter will take your place. You are free, but nothing has fundamentally changed. The second path is one of replacement. You can refuse Gehrman's offer. He rises, resigned to his fate, and engages you in a final tragic duel. Upon defeating the first hunter, you release him from his long imprisonment. But the master of the dream demands a new caretaker. The moon presence descends from the pale sky and embraces you, binding you to the dream. You take Gehrman's place, confined to his wheelchair, ready to guide the next generation of hunters. You have honored his wish to be free, but you are now trapped in his stead, a surrogate for the Great One, continuing the cycle indefinitely. The third path is one of ascension. There is a way to resist the moon presence. Throughout your journey, you may have found remnants of stillborn Great Ones. 3 pieces of a third umbilical cord. By consuming these before confronting Gehrman, you can fill your mind with enough insight and power to see the truth and defy a god. After you defeat Gehrman, the moon presence descends again to claim you. But this time, you resist. It sees you not as a surrogate, but as a rival. You fight this pale blood creature, the true source of the hunt. Upon its defeat, the cycle is finally broken. You have transcended your humanity, evolving into something new. You become an infant Great One. the first human to successfully achieve this metamorphosis. The doll, the dream's gentle caretaker, picks you up, ready to raise the new god who will usher in humanity's next childhood. From the silent tombs of the Thumerians to the waking dawn of Yharnam, the story of Bloodborne is a cycle of ambition, tragedy, and the terrifying consequences of reaching for knowledge that lies beyond human comprehension. It is a story of how a quest for evolution, whether through the mind or through the blood, led a city to ruin. The healing church, born from a promise of salvation, delivered only a plague of beasts. The hunters, created to protect the innocent, became trapped in an endless nightmare. And a lone traveler seeking a cure was faced with a choice that could either perpetuate this cycle of suffering or break it by becoming a part of the cosmic horror itself. Whether the hunter awakens to a forgotten dream, becomes the new jailer of a nightmare, or evolves into an infant god, one truth remains. Humanity, in its frailty, is caught between the beasts of the earth and the indifferent gods of the cosmos. The night of the hunt may end, but the disquieting silence that followed is filled with the promise of another dream and another nightmare.